Okay, so I think you have your mechanics is actually pretty good on your pull. Um, there's probably just two areas on your pull that I would try to work on a little bit. Um, so I know this video on the left is a little bit more choppy because it's lower frame rate. Um, Probably the biggest item I would work on is your catch.
Still the catch. Mm-hmm.
So your pull is really good. So I'm gonna help draw a couple lines so you can kind of think about some of this concept. Okay, so just before we catch in, let me draw a couple lines connecting our ear to our hip.
Kind of goes back to what you were telling me with not bending down. Yeah, just lock it. Yeah, just wait.
Okay, so right here.
Well, actually, yeah.
My fat fingers. Okay, and then as we advance in, okay, good solid catch here. The lower arm is probably bent maybe a little bit more than it should.
Right.
So as you get into the meat of your stroke right here, you can see that there's probably a little bit more bend. I think a little bit is natural, but like usually I look for maybe no more than something like this. So you can see this is bent a little bit more. So try to keep that a little bit more straight. That's probably not the primary focus of what I want you to be looking at though. In your catch portion,
How is there so many calories in this food? Yeah. You know, like so skinny.
actually, now I'm looking at it.
That's it. And I don't drink that coffee.
That might actually be one of the main things. But okay, so two things. On your setup or your toast, right? This should already be straight. So I think like as you're going into the catch, you're already set up with this lower arm a little bit. So I would want you, so you can see like by the time I come, like right as I pass through my 2 gate, it's already straight, right? So when we're coming through our recovery here, you kind of are
It's
consistently,
like it's bent.
you're
Yeah.
like consistently slightly bent. So I think what happens, I think what I was seeing in your catch, because you're getting pretty good body weight onto the catch, but your lower arm is setting the blade up so that it will be slightly negative when you're fully buried. So like when you're into the meat of it, which like starts around here, right, it's slightly negative. So that's something that will slow down your performance a little bit on the water. Whereas if you keep it a little bit more straight, you end up, I would want you to get into this same position where your top hand is right by your eye level or just close to there, and your lower arm and body is still set so that you get the blade angle slightly more positive here,
Yeah.
right? But aside from that, I think, like I was saying, I think you have really solid mechanics of how you're using your body through your pull, because your toast here is really good, and like some people have an issue with being too lean forward on their toast, and I think you're at a good position because when you get into your catch, you still have some lean to give. But yeah, you can see like
That bottom arm.
yeah, the biggest thing is the bottom arm. It's almost like you're starting your pull a little bit early because you can see that the lower arm, and so right when you go into it, your blade's already kind of pulling back. Versus versus if you keep it a little bit more straight. Well, what I want to try to almost have you visualize is seeing that the blade is going to go in up here, and then you're going to start the pull back. But yeah, I think it all boils down to making sure that lower arm doesn't bend before you get into that good solid entry. You have a good setup through this.
Is that too far back?
So looking at this, I would say it's a little bit. So even my left side pulls a little bit too far back in this video, but I think it's also because my left side I'm able to pull harder. So what I want, like how I define if you're pulling too far back is if I visually see that you're like still, and a lot of times it's like on the erg because we can feel the resistance really strong with our top hand. Because again, right, the rope pulls against our paddle directly in line with the rope, right? So the rope is pulling back this way. So when we get into this angle, the thing that's going to help us pull against the rope the strongest is if we muscle this top hand down, right? In the water, it's not going to really be reacting that way. So what I look for is typically once we get to around the hip, lower hand to the hip, or another way people like to think about is once our arm gets to the side of our torso, that's when we should start curling around. So when I hit the hip, so what I'm looking for is like, so you can see it, probably because my left side pulls a little bit harder, but you can see like my top hand here, in terms of how it looks like it's relaxed. So I'm not like, you can see that my muscle, like right when I get to right around my knee, which is where this is, yeah. And you can see, I mean, this is a little bit harder to see because it's a little choppier in video.
I think I'm still pushing.
Yeah, just a little bit, but it's not too terrible, but there is just a little bit. And then the other thing to try to fine tune, right? Look at my lower arm as I get past my hip. You can see that it's kind of shrugging out. So let's go ahead and let's look at the front view because that will help you visualize it quite a bit better. So you can see like right when I get to around my knee, hip, so you can tell that I'm starting my exit because you see my elbow starting to come out, right? And like once you hit your knee, you're still pretty tucked in the back there. So our recovery style with that lower arm is a little bit different. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be exactly the same, but usually it's indicative of if you're holding tension in your lower arm.
Yeah, that's going to slow my recovery.
Yeah, and also like your hands naturally going to just be a little bit more tense. So that's why I'm trying to reinforce everyone to relax the wrist. And this is literally what I'm looking for because then I know absolutely there's no way you can hold tension in your forearm if you're droopy, right? Like just holding it straight, even though it might feel super relaxed, is still holding something. So as much as possible, it's almost like I'm asking you to dangle your hand as you come back forward. Right. So a little bit of that tension is, yeah, like you said, it's going to slow down how quickly you can kind of get it straight too. Right. So as soon as I'm passing this 2 position, because I'm super relaxed, the little bit of that little elbow shrug helped carry that weight forward a little bit more quickly. Okay. So I think you obviously have really good potential to improve a little bit more because your strokes even halfway through this looks very strong. And then making sure that you capitalize on every little area that you can relax more is going to help. Okay.